very good morning and welcome to Rise and Shine. It's the Friday edition and we're excited to welcome you on board to this conversation. My name is Francis Oyima Edet. This is Rise and Shine where we talk Nigeria, take you around the country, around the continent of Africa, and of course the world. Very specific things and peculiar things that will affect you, affect us, affect each and every one of us as Nigerians, as Africans. Of course, we'll always encourage you to join the conversations on our social media platform, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtvlive.ng. Of course, the phone numbers will also be displayed on your screen. You can send us a direct message. You can call to be part of the conversation. But today on Talking Nigeria, we'll be starting off from our very first flash news. We'll be looking into corruption and fraud in government, where we see the federal government inaugurates committee to review public procurement law. Of course, we'll also be looking at the Senate's President Godswill Akpabio has urged the federal government to rightly channel ecological funds into solving environmental. The House of Rep Speaker Tajuddin Abbas has recommended privatization for Nigeria's refineries as a way of getting it up and fully operational. We'll also be looking into the fact that the federal government and the states are targeting 17.5 million jobs. And of course, they're also eyeing about 1.5 billion US dollars donor funds as far as unemployment is concerned. Of course, we'll take a stop in Rivers State, where the political crisis is taking an interesting new twist. We see the Rivers factional leader, or speaker rather, seeking jail terms for his colleagues and deputy. Of course, we move over to the issue between the NBC and broadcast station when it comes to muzzling the press and the media, where the court has upheld restraining order against NBC on fining, media organizations in the country. These and many other issues are what we will be focusing on this morning on Rise and Shine. And as I said earlier on, it is very important that you join the conversation. Of course, hopefully midway down the line, we'll also be having our guests, and we will look into some very key statement that came from the office of the presidency. Of course, we'll also saw that the federal government is planning to unveil the National Lifestyle Charter for citizens in the country. That is to spell out the expectations from government on the people of Nigeria, and of course what Nigerians should expect from the government. An interesting conversation it would be, and of course you don't want to miss out on that. Of course, another very serious issue that we have to look at is the question of insecurity. We see that the federal government is moving to probe correctional service personnel who have been aiding terrorists. Recall us that yesterday or the day before yesterday, there was an allegation made by security chiefs that personnel of the Nigerian Correctional Facility aiding and abating terrorists from the cells, meaning that terrorists can stay within the confines of the correctional facility, and with the help of these correctional facility personnel, plan and execute successfully terrorist activities. I mean, that is the most serious, the most horrible news to have come from the National Assembly, and of course the allegation coming from the security chief. But all of these are things that we are going to look into, and I urge you not to go anywhere, otherwise you'll be missing out. And of course, you don't want to miss out. Just stay with us.
Rise and shine.
It's a good delight to be here this morning to do this with you. Of course, Francis already gave us a rundown of some of the things we're expecting to talk about this morning, and quite a plethora of things. I think one big issue that being Friday and taking some of those low-key human end stories, I don't know how many of us remember seeing the article where we saw that the president said he deserves to be on the Guinness World Record, for policies and reforms that he has brought to bear. I think that's just one thing that has really stayed on my mind. But still looking at strong issues, I think one of the other strongest conversations we're looking at this morning is that the likes of Jega, Babachi and others have reflected on INEC 2023 elections amid the fresh appeal court verdicts. More like the former heads and chairmen of INEC are looking to review what the agency has been doing since after them. But let's see what this conversation holds this morning. But we'll go top to our flash stories this morning, to the very top, where we see that the federal government is inaugurating a committee to review public procurement law. Of course, big question on the table is to look into corruption and fraud allegations in government. This has recently become a really big problem. We've seen the House of Representatives summoning agencies upon agencies to come and give reports and accounts of budgets and allocations that have been made to them in years past, some of whom have made procurements even from internally generated revenue in their agencies, but cannot give a clear-cut report, no receipt of any kinds of these procurements made. But of course, we see the fact that the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice Lateef Fagbemi-San is leading the committee set up to review the 2007 Public Procurement Act. Now, other members of the committee that are expected to be on the board: Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, of course, Wale Edu. We also see here Minister of Budget and Economic Planning is a member. Director General Bureau of Public Procurement is a member. We'll have quite a number of people. Now, the benchmark and time given for them to be able to fulfill this assignment is 1 month. Review the 2007 Procurement Act. Let's see what we have therein. Is it still viable? Is it still good for us to continue at this time, looking at the changes that we have in the landscape of the economy and the business terrain? But we see a statement by the Director of Information Office of the SGF, Shegun Imoese, saying George Akume inaugurated the committee to look into issues that would attend to the current economic realities in the country, as opposed to the Procurement Act of 2007. So are we looking and expecting some policy reforms in all of this to more like update the Procurement Act to reflect on the economic realities of the country in 2023, more like 2024 in a couple of weeks?
Well, it's first and foremost a good move made by the leadership of the country. If we go back to budgeting in the country, we go back to the issue of padding, we go back to the different procurement frauds that have been alleged in the different NDAs and agencies of government. Recall one of the rearranged cases or charges brought against the embattled CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele also borders on fraud in the area of procurement while he was at the helms of affairs in the Apex Bank as the governor of the CBN. Of course, these issues have been on for a longest time. Nigerians have been asking questions. Why does it seem like when it comes to procurement in government offices, due process has not been followed? Yeah, don't forget recently, over 86 ministries were asked to come in for questioning over still spending of their respective ministries, which goes down to the issue of procurement. Now, and of all of these ministries, the report coming from the National Assembly Committee was that most of them could not provide receipts of procurement, receipts of things that had been purchased, receipts of expenditure that has been made by their respective ministries, departments, and agencies. So it raises a whole lot of question: is the law that we have as far as procurement even valid? And if it is, why is there a problem in the implementation, or is it obsolete and needs some changes? I'd like to believe that the federal government has taken a look into the law and seen some loopholes that needs to be reformed or needs to be, beaten up a little bit to align with the recent trends or the new trends, or furthermore be effective enough to allow for public office holders to do due diligence when it comes to procurement. There should be a well thought out, a well laid out plans of who and who within the government coffers is responsible or should be responsible for every act of procurement in the interest of government. Of course, that should be able to make it a lot easier for auditing, and also when it comes to probing, to understand when and where these things had been. It's definitely a step taken in the right direction. And if all of the individuals responsible or saddled with the responsibility to review would do a great job, then I'm very much sure Nigerians would be able to see a significant, a better reviewed policy
when they review the Procurement Act and find loopholes or things to be improved upon, will it be implemented by the federal government? Will it be implemented by the agencies involved in carrying out all of this? But then we move on to our next flash story, where we see the Senate President urging the federal government to channel ecological funds to environmental problems. We can't say without, much alarm, the environmental challenges that we see all around us. The flood is the primary issue right now in Nigeria. Thankfully, we do not live in a climate where we have too many natural disasters, but that doesn't mean that we should not be a people who are proactive. Bad enough, the flooding effect is strong. We lose people, we lose property. But we saw the Senate President Godswill Akpabio urging the federal government to channel ecological funds to tackle environmental issues that are life-threatening. Of course, Akpabio made the call on Thursday when the Permanent Secretary of the Ecological Project Office, Malam Shehu Ibrahim, led officials of his agency in an interactive session with the Senate President. Now, we're talking about the submission of monthly 3 billion naira allocation to the agency, and of course the reports say this 3 billion naira allocation is grossly inadequate to tackle the request it gets daily. So it's more like there are things happening all around the country and they have like an allocation of 3 billion naira, but it doesn't take care of the issues that they have. Now, the Senate leadership is reported to be in charge of over 5,000, the agency rather is reported to be in charge of over 5,000 requests from disaster-ravaged communities across the country for urgent attention. Now, when we say, like when I said earlier that Nigeria is not plagued by natural disasters, it doesn't mean that we do not have things of strong magnitude happening in places. For instance, if you look around Akwa Ibom State, we have a lot of erosion issues where we see gully erosion, eating into roads and all of those kinds of things. That in itself is dangerous enough, and it takes into, millions of naira, if not billions of naira, to try to reconstruct all of those kinds of areas. So, I mean, the Senate President making this call to the federal government, putting ecological funds to environmental problems so that we can handle it on time and not see them escalate into way serious natural disasters.
Well, it's a good move request made by the Senate President. I mean, ecological problems are everywhere in Nigeria. You look around from the encroachment in the Lake Chad Basin axis, you look about the ocean surge in the south and other states that are surrounded by rivers. You look around areas that are ravaged by erosion, menace, and it is literally like everywhere in Nigeria there is, that particular specific problems that needs the intervention of government when it comes to the environment. And what we'll look at 3 billion monthly allocation being given to the agency to tackle this, and would ask, is that enough? I mean, in recent times, we've asked questions about what the ecological funds are being utilized for. I remember just during the last the last few months of the former President Muhammadu Buhari's administration, ecological funds were distributed to the state. And of course, the questions were asked, what has been done with those funds? It also goes back to the issue of corruption. I mean, it is one thing for the ecological funds to be available, to be accessible. It's another thing for it to be utilized to solve some of those problems that have been highlighted by Nigerians across the respective states of the Federation. So it's a good advocacy made by the Senate President Godswill Akpabio. We do hope Ibrahim and the agency will, prioritize taking into consideration the different things happening, especially assessing on the need to first prioritize the area that is most ravaged, the area that is much in need of immediate and emergency help in order to avert some of the disasters that are looming. But again, it also calls for a different twist in the activities of the agency. For the longest time, we need to get to a point where the state government and the federal government are able to collaborate. I mean, I've been to erosion sites or natural disaster sites, and we're told when you get to ask questions, the state government will tell you, oh, this is too much for the state government to handle. This is something that the federal government would need to come in and handle. And then you ask, what about having a collaboration between the federal government and the state government is to work in the interest of the people. So these are also things that we need to look out for as we continue to work together to build and rebuild Nigeria.
Of course, very important conversation that must be had at this time. But let's move on to our major stories. That's all we have for you on our Flash News for this morning.
Rise and shine. Rise and shine. Rise and shine.
Welcome back, of course. Moving on to our major stories for this morning, top of which we see the fact that, this morning, the Senate's House of Representatives, I beg your pardon, Tajuddin Abbas is recommending privatization of the Nigeria's oil and gas refineries. Conversations that we've been having these end of the year, we are expecting that some moribund refineries will be up and running, but we see the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tajuddin Abbas, calling for the privatization of oil refineries in the country to address the perennial crisis bedeviling the oil sector. Of course, he made the recommendation on Thursday while playing host to top management of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, led by the Managing Director, Melikiari. Of course, it's without what we call it now. The conversation of privatizing the oil and gas sector is something that has been, up for grabs. Even the fact that give up the moribund refineries to certain people who are interested in the private sector to come and man and run it. Let's see if we can make some sense and some good out of it. It has been a conversation that we've had. But having Tajuddin Abbas in charge of the House of Representatives also making this recommendation for the federal government and the oil and gas sector to strongly consider privatization. I think privatization, public-private partnerships are one of the quickest ways that an economy can move forward. And if Nigeria thinks it's time to actually move into a public-private partnership to move the oil and gas sector forward, I think we'll be coming into a brand new day of hope with regards to oil and gas. Just harnessing the resources that we have, taking advantage of it, being able to refine the crude that we have in the country, it would make more sense for us, and we will gain more from the fact that we have this natural resource in the country than all of the pockets of diversification that we experience in the particular sector. Now, of course, there is need for to make these refineries have multi-dimensional uses. So even when we're talking about the rehabilitation of moribund refineries, it's not that we're just talking about the fact that we need refineries to be up just to get crude and refine. What are all the other, sub duties that we are expecting these moribund refineries to be able to do for us if they're up? And taking advantage of the private sector, would we be able to have the moribund refineries up way earlier than just allowing the federal government to do this on their own?
Well, if we get to privatization, and if you look at Nigeria's history and getting businesses operational and functional, it comes down to public-private partnership or government partnering with investors and corporate organizations to kickstart transformations and rechange the narrative in the different sectors. I mean, getting to have the level of partnership that government is possible of gaining would also change the narrative. Let's look at the fact that Aliko Dangote has been able to build one of the, the best and most talked about refinery in the country. That compared to what the federal government has or the government of the country has been said to be completely not, placed at par. So if we have individuals like Aliko Dangote being able to construct their own refinery, then we have people who are, capable of also doing that. But rather than construct brand new refineries, will rather come in and, partner with the government to get fully operational all the refineries that we have in the country, and possibly, following the words of the Senate President, who said that there is need also to build a lot more refineries in the country, aside from the moribund ones that we're trying to get fully operational, then of course it will go a long way in changing the narrative. Don't forget, I think it was Dr. Anthony Usaro who, drew our mind back to the byproduct of refining in the country during the early days when Nigeria used to produce or refine, crude oil, and the fact that we had a whole lot of other companies who depend on those byproducts from, refining crude materials to actually, fund their businesses or run their businesses as raw materials. So if we get to that point, it will be in the interest of Nigerians, it will be to the benefit of the country, because you're not just going to be looking at, reducing the cost of production or reducing the cost of petroleum products. You're also going to look at the aftermath or ripple effect of that, which would go into having a lot more businesses springing up back in Nigeria, which will also go down to having, some level of number of Nigerians being employed in those different industries that will come in or come up as a result of that. You also be looking at the fact that foreign reserve will also be increasing, because by then we'll not just be exporting raw materials and importing back, the refiner would rather, if need be exporting the refined, products, which also will be to the advantage of Nigeria. So it's a good call. I do hope that, most times when the National Assembly, urges the federal government to do something, it takes a whole lot of going back and forth and a whole lot of talking before we see the implementation. I do hope that the National Assembly's comments coming from the Speaker himself, would be well appreciated and looked into thoroughly by the leadership of this country and the relevant government agencies. And then, of course, they should be able to get it implemented and in the interest of Nigerians.
I think part of the strongest conversation that Tajuddin Abbas is having with the NNPCL and, the top management is the fact that for moribund refineries, Francis, we know that several millions and billions of naira running into dollars have been used to maintain these moribund refineries in the past few years. First of all, we know that people work there and they earn. So one thing that Tajuddin Abbas is saying, let us, find other ways that these refineries can work as opposed to just waiting for them to refine, so that the salaries received by people working in these refineries is actually deserved. I mean, it looks like a waste pipe, for the federal government with regards to revenue and all of that. But, he's also calling to the fact that when we privatize these refineries, it will be one way to manage those kinds of issues. And I think one of the important things that he pointed out is that upon the full-scale resumption of the Dangote refinery, it will be clear to the federal government and the oil sector in Nigeria that they cannot run some of these operations on their own, and will need the private sector to come in. He has also reiterated the fact that there are certain aspects of business, even under the downstream and the upstream oil and gas sector, that the governments cannot run. It would have been best handled by the private sector. I think it's worthy of saying that it's good if we are coming into a day where the federal government and the leadership of the country is realizing the specific needs that they have in terms of management and all of that. So if they come into all of these kinds of partnerships, it will grossly help us to a very, very large extent. Spending lots of money and time deceiving themselves, according to Tajuddin Abbas, that some of these businesses can be run by the government, is something that Tajuddin Abbas is saying has to end. Let's see how we can bring more private hands. But I think another question will be, I know it feels like, you know, there is money and resource in the country, but looking at some of the business bottlenecks that we have in the country, do we really think that there's going to be lots of Nigerians that will want to, you know, invest in these moribund refineries? Now, that is one question. The other question is, when we say let us privatize, this privatization, are we opening it up also onto the international community? Will we be willing to have international communities and other nations of the world coming to partner with the federal government to privatize that sector? When we're talking privatization, we are only looking at Nigerians, you know, collaborating with the federal government to get this particular, you know, recommendation by Tajuddin Abbas effected in the country. But it's a good move. Like we'd always say, sometimes statements are not enough. Let's see what the federal government is actually willing to do to bring this to bear.
Of course, the statements are never going to be enough, and it's always going to be a question of implementation, and that will take commitment, to take political will on the part of the leadership of the country.
Proper strategizing also.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, that will definitely fall within the purviews of the Nigerian president, Ahmed Bola Tinubu. And the reactions from Nigerians at this point would be, we do hope that the presidency's renewed hope agenda and his commitment to it is absolute. And then, of course, it's going to take some of the hardest decisions that will be able to ensure that happens. Just picking back on you know, the comment that came from the NEC meeting held yesterday, presided over by the Vice President, Kashim Shettima, where he said the task of rebuilding the nation, the task of repositioning Nigeria, the task of rescuing the nation's economy and putting it back on the right track, it's in the hands of, you know, the leadership of this administration. And of course, that includes the state governors of the 36 states of the Federation and the FCT. Of course, those are very strong conversations coming from the government. Of course, they said a lot of tough decisions needs to be made and must be also implemented if we're going to get Nigeria out of that, you know, the economic situation or the economic downturn that we're currently in. And that's the reality on ground. But of course, the question would always be asked, it is not enough. We've had, and Nigerians would tell you, we have heard so much from this present administration. And just going back to the thing you said about President Ahmed Bola Tinubu asking it should be included in the Guinness World Record. Some persons will laugh about it. Personally, yesterday, I said, if the president is seeking to be introduced, there are certain things that must be looked at. Before we can say, okay, Mr. President, let's add you to the World Guinness Book of Record. I mean, we know that the GWR would be the one to review everything. But of course, before that review comes, the Nigerian people first and foremost would also have to review what is happening. Now, what has the policy statement of the president been so far? How has those policies, paved the way for the emergence of a new Nigeria, as the president has posited, that would, make him deserving of being enlisted or listed into the World Guinness Record? Now, you also ask, from all of the policy statement that has come from this present administration, how many of those policy statements have been implemented, and how many of them have been withdrawn and described as ill will, even by the leadership of the country, ill time, ill will, and of course ill intended, as the case may be. So it's a whole lot. It would have been a different ballgame if the policy so far rolled out by President Ahmed Bola Tinubu has met the needs of Nigerians, and each and every one of them across the different subsectors that it has been introduced into has brought about transformational changes. But for now, it is way too early for the president to even think of being enlisted into the World Guinness Book of Record. Perhaps at the end of his 3 years, remember he gave his ministers and appointees 3 years marching order to ensure that they get everything on track. And that was the expected time, projected time that he had given to himself and his administration to fix Nigeria. So if we are ever going to talk about the president being enlisted into the Guinness World Record, then it should come after that review. The Guinness World Record will look back, Nigerians will look back and say, okay, in this period of 3 years, the president has been able to, for a start, review the performances of his appointees. And then we've seen XYZ number of people who have been replaced for incompetence, for not being able to perform, for not meeting with the target that was set. We've seen XYZ being able to overperform. And of course, as a result of that, we've seen other appointees also attempting to have that healthy competition that will help them to match up and meet up. Of course, we'll also look into the policy effect on the generality of the Nigerian people, on the Nigerian economy as well. When all of those assessment is done, after the time frame that the president had set, that is when we can now say as a people, oh, president had come in with a renewed hope agenda. He had promised this, promised this, promised this, promised this. He has made these policies, these policies, these policies. They have all been implemented. These are the result of this policy implementation. And this is the effect, you know, by measuring of the statistics and the indices that has been in place. This is the effect and the turnaround that we can see and we have witnessed and we have experienced as Nigerians, that even the world will also see Nigeria move from a point of high inflation to a point of low inflation, that we're able to move from a point of the naira and the dollar going as high as 1,000 plus to about maybe reducing it to the barest minimum of 200 or 100 plus, as it used to be during the Goodluck Jonathan administration, that we are able to, you know, solve the insecurity problem in the country. We are able to solve the unemployment indices in the country. We are able to, you know, get the health sector fixed. We're able to get the educational sector fixed. It's not just going to be about the policy statement. We've had a lot of policy statement coming, you know, from the presidency and the federal government led by Ahmed Bola Tinubu. So it is not policy statement. It is not the press releases that is going to be used to judge if it's worthy of that role, but it is the performance and the result that will come from those policy statements, which of course will stem down to implementation, that will be used to judge.
Well, President Bola Tinubu is saying that his past exploits paved the way for his emergence as president, and that he deserves to be listed in the Guinness World Records. Of course, he was speaking to a group of investors earlier on in the week at the 10th Nigerian Business Forum. Now, of course, we see Tinubu crediting his success to overcoming investment obstacles in Nigeria. Now, he said noteworthy accomplishments should be acknowledged and quipped that was determined to actively pursue the inclusion of his name in the revered Guinness World Record. Now, it is surprising that you would see that a politician, a businessman would, you know, I think more like the fever of Nigerians wanting to be in the Guinness World Record has caught up with Mr. President, literally. Now, everyone, including himself, keeps dating back and looking back into his successes in as governor of Lagos State. And he's saying, you know, having been able to do all these things and what he's currently doing, his name deserves to be there. I think part of the things that, you know, Francis enumerated, apart from just all of these things, being able to do these things in a time frame that any other person has not been able to accomplish is some of the things that will make him deserving of being in the Guinness World Record. But when you say that, and I think another thing we'd even have to look at is, you know, does the Guinness World Record give room for, you know, some of these activities that you do as politicians to surface in their record, or just because of Mr. President, the Guinness World Record will need to review and, you know, create that kind of segments, you know, that kind of, what we call it, segments of some sort in the Guinness World Record to attend to such people.
Just going through Guinness World Record, I think yesterday I had to be a lot more deliberate. So I went through some of the, you know, requirements. If the title you're seeking is not already in existence, you can apply for a new one.
Oh, yeah.
And then be the first to have the title.
Great.
So the president is well within his rights and can actually do that. But when you're trying to do that, Mr. President, you need to understand that there are going to be criteria. And those
terms and conditions,
you know, as some of the things I've rolled out this morning, they are going to, it's not going to be about policy statement. I mean, anybody can make a policy statement, give a policy direction. This is how I want my government to go. But the problem is not in the policy statement. The problem is in the implementation. That is
timely implementation,
yes,
execution.
That is where it is. And the beautiful thing is that the president had already set the time limit for us. So if he intends to get on the GWR, then 3 years should be 3 years, and 7 months is already gone. So we are looking at 2 years and 3 months left for the president and his cabinet members. Can that happen in 2 years, 2 years and 3 months? Can we have the generality of the, you know, the myriad of problems we are facing in Nigeria go away or significantly been reduced. I mean, yeah, just, listening to or watching or reading the news about the fact that there are collaborators within the Nigerian correctional facility aiding terrorists. It's demoralizing to even think of that. I mean, these are persons who are perpetrating havoc on the generality of Nigerians. They're maiming, they're killing, they're raping, they're destroying farmlands, they're destroying properties, they're sacking communities, killing people in their numbers. And then, by some stroke of luck, by the activities of the Nigerian Armed Forces, they put their life on the line and are able to apprehend these people. And then somebody still within the employ of government, for what? Greed, would take money and then collaborate with these people to continue doing the sin. It's like something we see in the American movies.
Serious something that we see in the American movies. But let's move on to something that is really, really pressing for me this morning. The fact that the former boss of the Independent National Electoral Commission, in the person of Jega, has come to, review the 2023 cycle of election. Of course, we see that Jega, Babachia, and others reflect on INEC 2023 elections amid fresh appeal court verdict. Now, there's quite a number of things that has been enumerated this morning. Now, a former chairman of the, agency, Professor Atahi Rujega, and the former secretary to the government of the Federation, SGF, Babachir Lawal, have bared their minds on worrisome conduct of elections in Nigeria. First of all, before we even get into the belly of this, it's such a refreshing thing to hear that, someone of that repute is finally speaking up about the elections, so that it doesn't look like it is Nigerians that are talking out of context, so that it doesn't look like it is the media versus the federal government and INEC, so that it doesn't look like it is Nigerians and social media versus what the judiciary says it is. When you have men that have sat in that particular seat and have conducted elections, yes, these elections might not have been without problems, but can we really honestly evaluate the 2023 election and look into the loopholes that were there? In recent times, we have asked the question, what is the worth of the Electoral Act of 2022? Because the elections held in February 25 and March 18 made nonsense of the Electoral Act. Where does it stand? By the time we get to the next cycle of elections, are we looking at curating brand new sets of election rules? I remember that in the former administration of Muhammadu Buhari, that is something he really found himself to have done, and left as a legacy for elections in Nigeria. But we saw how that didn't even affect positively the terrain of elections. But then, of course, yesterday, Atahi Rujega disclosed how prominent politicians compromise security and registration officials and manipulate voter registration. Now, he also, of course, he was delivering a keynote address at the policy roundtable on the theme, improving the integrity of Nigeria's voter register. Of course, this is something done by Yaga Africa. Now, he said a major challenge that there is in the sense is the extent and magnitude of registration of underage persons and foreigners, which is grossly exaggerated and politicized. Now, a lot of factions in all of the election space, they would take one small information in all of these and just blur it up. And I think that's that's what Jega is saying when we are talking about, first of all, that we have a lot of registration of underage persons and foreigners also, because that was something that we heard a lot during the what we call registration season, during the Buhari administration, talking about how we had a lot of people up north who are not from Nigeria, having underage persons. That has been a narrative that has plagued registration processes for elections in Nigeria. Now, Atahi Rujega is actually saying, to an extent, that particular information is exaggerated and oftentimes politicized. Now, that is something to look at. We are driving to a point where we say all of these things that Atahi Rujega has, enumerated, and the former secretary to the federal government has enumerated. When they bring these reports, Who takes it, sits down with it, evaluates it, and see how we can be incorporated into the needs that we have in the country. That's the problem. I don't think that Nigeria is bereft of information. I don't think that Nigeria is bereft of solution-oriented conversations. It's just that we do not have people taking these reports, these conversations, and putting them in the right place. When we are talking about putting round holes in round specks in round holes, it's just the problem of Nigeria. But let's look further into some of the things that he talked about. Now, that's a major challenge. We also look at the fact that corruption is a problem. That one, it cuts across all agencies. Now, community connivance during election. Now, he gave an example. In some areas during registration, notable politicians organize illegal activities, threaten and compromise security and registration officials, and get residents in the communities to look away and say nothing while these acts are being perpetuated. Now, you will not say that Atari Jega does not know what exactly he's saying, Francis.
Well, it is one thing for Jega to come out at this point to speak about the elections, the things that are happening. And one question Nigerians would ask at this point is, why do Nigerian public officials speak only when they are no longer in charge of those offices? Because it's the same Jega that conducted elections, and Nigerians had a whole lot of issues with it. And yet he never spoke for once about the challenges, that were highlighted during his era, his tenure as the man in charge of the electoral umpire. So it's a worrisome trend, it's a worrisome situation playing out in Nigeria that it's literally like once the people are in power, their mouth is somehow shut, their senses are somehow eroded, their morality is somehow decayed to the point that they cannot speak against the ills that is happening in the system. So if we are going to solve the problem, we need to get to a point where leaders speak when they are in charge, and not just speak, but take the actions to ensure the reforms in the sector that is entrusted to them. Now, let's imagine that Jega was able to attend to some of the issues that were highlighted during his tenure. We will have seen an electoral umpire that has witnessed some level of reforms that Nigerians would see. And then by the time another person takes over, it will be expected that the person will build upon what Jega had established while he was there at the helms of affairs. But we have not seen that happen. He's left the scene, he's been away from a while, and now he's coming back to react upon the activities of what has transpired during the just concluded elections. The reality on ground here is this: Nigerians know that these illegalities happen. But Jega cannot say that Nigerians have not been speaking. Now, when Nigerians speak, what does the Electoral Umpire Authority do? That's the question. And it spans back to when he was in charge. When Nigerians say, we are witnessing politicians bringing in people, importing people to register in our wards, what does the Electoral Umpire do to attend to those concerns raised by Nigerians? Has there been any investigation or removing of those names from the register? No. The issue of underage voters in the northern part of this country has been on since when I was a child. Like, literally, there is no registration period that you would not see news, picture footages, video footages of children lining up and queuing up to register to vote. But what has been done about changing that narrative? Absolutely nothing. I think it was just sometime early this year that we saw pictures and footages of one of the security agencies that we saw children being recruited into it. And it became a comedy skit matter, and people laughed and joked about it. But these are realities that is happening in the country. Yeah. And then there are people in position of power and authority, people within the confines of government who are seeing these things, who have the evidence that these practices are happening, but they don't take actions. And guess what? I'm sure by the time Professor Mahmood Yakubu leaves office as the INEC chairman, he's going to come out with tons of things that needs to be changed.
Tons of review statements.
So why is he not making those reviews? And literally all the things that Nigerians have said so far, he has not responded to any of them. The only thing that INEC has said, the leadership of INEC has said, is that we've conducted the best election so far. And we're only going to build upon it. But they have forgotten that the issue of voter apathy, the issue of voter intimidation, the issue of manipulation of results, the issue of So many issues have been highlighted by Nigerians, international observers, and none of those issues have been spoken to by the leadership of this present administration as far as the electoral umpire is concerned. So I'm not disturbed. Nigerians are not disturbed about the things that have been highlighted. We already know that these things have been there. We are more concerned with leaders who have the sincerity and the willpower to say, as long as I'm in charge of this establishment, I am going to do something. I'm going to consider reforms that will work in the interest of Nigerians. I'm not going to sit back. I mean, it's the same thing that created the retired Justice Datijo's comment after his leaving office. Why did you not speak about those decay in the judiciary while you were sitting there?
But coming to that end, when you see you bring the likes of the justice, there are sometimes that the way the Nigerian system works, if you would attempt to even speak up, you might not say that the likes of justice did not try to speak up in their time. The forces that be in power, because it's difficult for you to be that one person that is trying to change an entire agency that is corrupt, that is bad. At this point, he's saying, I am going. You cannot, you can't catch me. Let's talk about what the big issues are. But just to put this to an end, Atari Rujega and Babachi are saying that prominent politicians have manipulated voter registration and have been a problem for elections. Now, another thing that Babachi, the former AGF said, it says, INEC is too centralized and must be reconstructed ahead of 2027 elections. The centralization of INEC should be decentralized. We also see the fact that Babache said 2023 polls created divisions among Nigerians on religious, ethnic lines. Serious conversations, things that should be reviewed. This conversation by Babache and Matai Rejega should be taken seriously by Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, INEC, and the federal government. There is a lot that needs to change in the way elections are conducted in Nigeria. We'll put a pause to our stories for now and head on to the news brief desk, where Mary Joseph is on standby. When we return, there's a lot more conversation to have with you on Rise and Shine this morning. Stay with us.
Christmas season is here again. Are you aware that making your business or product visible on a television space gives your brand a wider visibility and patronage? In the spirit of the season, Spectrum Television is offering a whopping 25% discount on all services. Advertise your products and services while this offer lasts from 1st December 2023 to January 31st, 2024. We are a television with a passion to take your business and services on a satisfactory lane. You do not want to miss this opportunity. For more inquiries, visit our city office at number 2 Taft Plaza Close off Akaitinen Road, Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, or call the following numbers on your screen. Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.
Every day marks a day of significance.
That in view of the apology tendered by this former minister who had earlier been cleared by this August Assembly,
as we face critical issues, developments and events which shape our social and political landscape here in Nigeria and beyond. Political Spectrum is a program specially designed to help make sense of all the moving parts of developments and occurrences in our nation's polity and political economy.
There is nothing wrong with Nigeria, but there's everything wrong.
The educational history of public figures holds significance beyond mere biographical details.
From executive, legislative and judicial developments at national and sub-national levels to international diplomacy and relations.
Join us for exclusive interviews with key political figures, expert opinions, analysts, thought-provoking conversations for and against, shedding light on the major issues that matter. We will always keep you updated on the most factual, smartest and unbiased reportage.
Stay tuned to Political Spectrum. Political Spectrum. All sides matter at the round table. Political Spectrum. Exclusive to Spectrum Television.
One truth not often told is about the transformation that Africa has undergone in recent decades. Africa is shaping its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity. On Spotlight Africa, we paint the African picture the African way, laced with truth, detail, and the color of the African continent. Join Uyai Anyekan every Tuesday and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Spotlight Africa, telling the African story.
broadcast and entertainment, sports on the go, and news from the world. Watch Spectrum TV on StarTimes DTH Channel 421 and free-to-air frequency 12733. Visit our website, spectrumtvlive.ng. Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.
Nigerian police, which is the only one allowed by gross level. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigerian police force, which shall be administered, organized, and supervised by the Nigerian police force.
No, my lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My lord, the Matters Council is leading the evidence in our matters.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord, but we can't be talking about cases which are in court.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord. These cases are in court, my lord. I'm just reminding you, lordship.
My lord, sorry, my lord, I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
Christmas season is here again. Are you aware that making your business or products visible on the television space gives your brand a wider visibility and patronage? In the spirit of the season, Spectrum Television is offering a whopping 25% discount on all the services. Advertise your products and services while this offer lasts from 1st December 2023 to January 31st, 2024. We are a television with a passion to take your business and services on a satisfactory lane. You do not want to miss this opportunity. For more inquiries, visit our city office at number 2 Taft Plaza Close off Akaitinen Road, Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, or call the following numbers on your screen. Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.
Welcome back and thanks for still being there. This is still Rise and Shine, the Friday edition, of course. bringing you topical issues of things happening in Nigeria, in-depth evaluation, especially from the human angle and of how these issues and policies being made by the federal government affects the everyday Nigerian. What does it mean for our economy? What does it mean for Nigerians at large? But of course, we've had several conversations. For you to catch up on everything that we have done on Rise and Shine today, do well to follow us across social media platforms, all of which you can find at SpectrumTv Live. Of course, we stream our content live on our website 247. We also have it available on YouTube, so you can always catch up on all that and engage us in a conversation, like, share, comment, and would absolutely love to get the feedback from you. But this morning, I'm being joined by Matthew O'Connor, who is the founder of Open Forum Nigeria. Of course, people who look into very strong human-related issues as human rights and all of those advocacy things. Good morning, Citizen O'Connor. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Yeah, good to be here once again.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, how is Nigeria this Friday morning? It's been a whole week and a lot of things have happened. Top of the table is all of the judgments from the appeal court, sacking one governor, sacking one lawmaker, all of that back and forth. As of this morning, the front pages of our papers, we are seeing that the appeal court for Nasarawa State has revoked the verdict of the tribunal. So there's a little back and forth, with election petitions, and we see Elders Forum in the north asking the judiciary to take heed to their activities. So, my first question is, how is Nigeria in the light of all of these things this morning?
Well, thank you. I want to say that Nigeria is in the maternity ward. We are going through labor pangs, and we are believing that with concerted efforts from patriots, we'll be able to surmount the challenges that have taken a completely new dimension, unlike any other time in the history of this country. We are aware that several institutions have been corrupted by political influences, and the latest, which is on the spotlight, is the one that when there was a hashtag about a month or two ago, all eyes on the judiciary, it was like an insult, it was like an embarrassment, it was like whatever people, and even the judiciary itself, termed it. They were very uncomfortable with all eyes on judiciary, but it is now obvious that all eyes should indeed be on the judiciary, and not just that. The fact that corruption has taken so much root and the level of poverty has plunged once thriving country to the world's capital of extreme poverty, and all talks now is about updating social registers, including in states that are supposed to be models of success of governance. So it's a thing of very serious concern that anybody that says we are fine, we may need to possibly ask that kind of person or such group of people pertinent questions. Let them answer the basic questions. Do we have the welfare and security of citizens, which are the primary responsibility of government? Do we have them? The answer will be no. And if that answer is no, you can imagine how bad the situation is. But I speak as a patriot. I speak as somebody who is working for the improvement of society 24/7. So I have hope that definitely there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that light, for me, is not that of a coming train. It is truly a light which, if we come together, we'll get there and we'll look back and say, oh, thank God, we made it.
It's quite difficult to have hope in Nigeria as of this time, but it's beautiful to see that at a time where it looks like it's constricted, the Tinubu-led administration is literally going by the mantra renewed hope. So let's see how this goes. But this serious, troubling conversation, the federal government is moving to probe workers and staff members of the correctional facility because there are very strong allegations that they are aiding and abetting Boko Haram activities and insecurity-related, terrorism-related activities. workers, staff members of the correctional facility. More like you have people that have been remanded in the prisons and in these facilities, but yet they're having people who are corroborating with them to, perform mayhem in the society. What with insecurity and security of the state of the nation? What are your thoughts? How viable is this report, and what exactly should the body language of the federal government be beyond probing?
The reality is that the probe itself is belated, and the fact that the issues being bandied about is like we don't have evidence that we can just bring to the fore, or no people have not been picked up for questioning. We will have been getting reports of what the security agencies have done. Why? You look back at I think it was Kuje prison break, where over 800 or thereabout very hardened terrorists and criminals were released. They did not release themselves. The place was invaded by terrorists and bandits, and the entire security apparatus were disengaged, and the then minister had no response. It shows complicity beyond those who work in those facilities. Look at the release of, was it about 100 or so of them in Lagos? It was a newspaper report, a news report that said federal government has released this number of terrorists. People suspected it was a fake news until government came out to own up. So what has been happening in the country, particularly from the last administration, is that we are not sure who we are dealing with when it comes to security matters. So for me, I'm happy that the National Assembly invited security chiefs. It's because of the conversations that came up that very information was made available. They should do more than that, because I'm sure even citizens know more because they see what has been happening and they can read meaning. You cannot fault them. If a whole security arrangement in a maximum security prison was not there when invaders came to release inmates, and how many of them were recaptured? If some were even released without any jailbreak, that they are repentant, or is it in Imo State? It's not peculiar to in the north. One will say Okuje prison in Abuja or Krikri in Lagos. The prison in Imo State, there was jailbreak or whatever it's called. How many people were rearrested? Who were the brain behind it? And when you look at the economy of the country and the fact that some persons have to transform wherever they operate to their gold mine or to their oil wells, you cannot but know that some very prominent inmates, some of them prominent by themselves, some of them are being sponsored by well-to-do people. When they are in those facilities, there will be contact. So you have some persons who may be given very special attention, and then the connections. It's a network until we are ready to confront insecurity, the perpetrators, no matter how highly placed, including the last administration that supervised the ministry when hardened criminals and bandits and terrorists were released until today. That marked the end of it. So I want them to do much, much more than that.
Speaking of, these incidents at the correctional facilities, just this week, a memo has been sent out to the security agencies to collaborate and mop up, the people that have not yet been, recaptured back into the Kuje prison, because a lot of them are still AWOL. So like you said, an offshoot of the security meeting that was recently had That's on the one side. How possible do you think it is going to be for the architecture of security that we have in Nigeria? Do you think that they have the resources? One, do they have the willpower to actually go in and make sure that every one single person who escaped from that Kuje prison is brought back? Number two, over the years, especially since the advent of Boko Haram and all of those things, we've continually heard of probes, of names that are going to be mentioned and listed for corroborating, with terrorists in Nigeria. But years have gone down, over 10, 15 years. We haven't seen for once the federal government, through successive governments, ever bringing out this list of persons. Now it goes beyond catching the people that are perpetrating the day-to-day terrorism action, the bandits. What happens to the upline, the big boys who are sitting and, and calling the shots? We have a security expert we oftentimes speak with, and he would say that Nigeria has all of the information that it needs to, square the score with the bandits in Nigeria, but why aren't they using the information at their disposal?
Back to the Kuje experience, remember, I think it was the DSS that said that they had given security reports about 6 times which were ignored, and there was conversation in public domain because when when there was that train attack where travelers were abducted, and along the line, it was like speculated that, the release of those people was predicated upon an agreement to release some inmates and all of that. We cannot place our fingers on that, but those were some of the conversations in domain. So if truly there were exchanges which were not direct, as in release bandits or terrorists, and so that they can release the people they have abducted. And talking about abduction, you remember the Akwa Ibom core members are in the kidnappers' den. So if some terrorists are released based on whatever negotiations, government knows better how to manage security information. But when you talk about the issue of funding, I don't think in the history of this country, the last since 1960, the budget, the entire expenditure on security within the last 8 years and now, I'm sure will surmount whatever we've spent 50 years behind. So the issue is not funding. The issue is even the corruption in the security arrangements, because remember the National Assembly invited some of the service chiefs to come and answer questions, and even one of them, assets were forfeited and some amount frozen and all of that. But the worst of it all is that we have some non-state actors who are religious leaders, who are community leaders, somebody or some persons will be bold enough to say that these bandits, these terrorists are freedom fighters for their section of the country. Two, and one of them actually said during the last elections that any presidential candidate or party that will want to fight bandits should not be supported. It's in public domain. And so banditry and terrorism has become an industry. So it's a very, very huge challenge on the country, because even these people that say this, that bandits are freedom fighters or terrorists are freedom fighters, nothing has happened to them. They have not been called to question. And they're still walking free. So it's a very huge challenge. And some persons who were even accused of being relating with terrorists, some of them have found their ways to public offices. Yes. And what do you expect? Some of the terrorists who were said to be released as repentant, we've seen some of them going back, becoming a problem. And we've seen some non-state actors mediating between government and these terrorists, going to the forest to meet with them, whereas this same forest that even the security agencies don't go there on their own. But they will go there with security agencies, just going with them, and then the terrorists will carry their arms and talk, and we see the video, we see the conversations, and one of them was even conferred with a very high-ranking traditional title in one of the northern states that raised eyebrow. Yeah, so it's a very huge problem which we cannot just wish that someday it will go away. We've got to be very determined, very intentional to fight it, because the prospects of making money, very easy money from that industry, would not allow those people to back down until they meet a higher firepower. And that must be done soonest. Otherwise, the present administration will be seen to be complicit.
Serious conversation. The present administration will be seen as complicit if they do not go ahead to execute in line with the information at their disposal and bring security. Well, we hear that under the Tinubu administration that there is some form of glimpse of hope with how insecurity is going to be handled in the country. Let's hope to see that beyond the glimpse of hope that something strong will be done. We've recently heard lots of reports from the Nigerian Air Force, saying, oh, they nabbed this terrorist site today, this banditry hideout. I mean, just this one on the front page of the National, that we have 12 pro pilots, for all of these kinds of air raids that have been decorated. So it looks like there is something being done. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I want to say something. The hope is not just in a mantra. The hope is something that we must work towards to achieve. But as presently structured, the Defense Ministry is one-sided, and even one of the ministers has been called out by a governor of his state. That's a former governor of Zamfara State, Matawale. He's the Minister of State for Defense, and the governor of the state currently, and the video is there. The commissioner spoke, alleging that the governor was complicit in some relationship with terrorist funding, support, and all of that, and the conversation has not died. And we have the minister from the north, Minister of Defense is from the north, and we have Minister of State from the north, whereas insecurity is across the country. We have very serious insecurity
If we had lots to do, wouldn't you have contributed?
In the south. So I want to see, and I'm recommending that apart from the bad impression given by the sitting governor of Zamfara State over the former governor on security issues, that ministry should be tinkered. There should be somebody from the south, any part of the southern Nigeria, to act as the Minister of State or even the minister. There must be a swap. As presently structured, it is one of the low points in the leadership recruitment of the President Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration.
Having a minister from the south at that position, do you think it's going to affect the quality of work done, especially because we know that the herb of this insecurity is mostly northeast, and all of those.
Not quite. Sorry to cut in.
Yeah, I know that it is widespread insecurity issues, but then we usually are talking Borno, we are talking all of those states in the north.
You can't fail to talk about Imo states. You can't fail to talk about
that's a sectional issue.
No, it's not quite.
It's a broad sectional issue. All of which still comes under insecurity. Yes, it's a broad spectrum of insecurity. So we have two major hotspots. The crisis in the southeast and the crisis up north. In the centers that are hotspots. Yes. So that's why I'm asking. Do you think that having a person in the south, a person from the south rather, in that position, do you think it is going to help us to balance out our approach to handling this cases?
Intelligence gathering. It's impossible for you to bring a novice here and you expect him to understand the language, understand the politics, understand the intricate issues that has to do with the environment. In fact, when I saw that appointment, I was embarrassed.
But same will go for a southerner who has to serve the insecurity needs of those in the north.
No. We have minister and minister of state. The two
cannot be
should not.
Okay. So let's I think that pretty much answers the question. So just before we go, in less than a minute, we have a problem on our hands. We have some youth corps members who were on their way to NYSC camp in Zamfara State, who were abducted, mostly Akwa Ibom sons and daughters. And I think it has happened twice in the course of corps members going to camp. There's been a recent advocacy by Akwa Ibom People's Congress, right, asking for the release of these persons. Letters have been written to the president, written to the state governor. What exactly is going? It's been 100 days or more since this happened, and we've had 2 sets of people come out of the NYSC camp already. What is the fate of these persons?
Thank you very much for that question. First of all, Igbo People's Congress is registered in the US, and it is headed by Professor John G. Okun. We have the board chairman in the person of distinguished Professor Hilary Young. I happen to be the global director of communications, and it's an advocacy group. It's not a socio-political, it's not a socio-cultural group. It's non-partisan, and they speak for justice and for development. And when they watched, we watched what has been happening. That I think that was August 17 or thereabout. Our sons and daughters who were going to Sokoto to serve the country and the mandatory National Youth Service program were abducted in Zamfara. And we had believed that government would swing into action immediately to rescue those patriots. But unfortunately, yesterday, in fact today is about 100 days now, they have been in captivity, and we've seen video, we've seen letters from the parents that government at any level has not reached out to them. And the trauma on them, it made Igbo People's Congress, otherwise called IPC, to hold a press conference where we want to draw the attention of the government and the people that we should not keep quiet. There's no organization that has done that in the last 4 months to seek for the release of these abducted corps members. Interestingly, another set was kidnapped on November 1st.
Yes.
And it was just yesterday, it was on your station, you're doing, Spectrum is doing a wonderful job. You hosted the father of one of the abductees that was in Kogi State, Pastor Harry Udo, and he narrated his experience. We were looking for that information. We could not even see it. We will have added to the letter that we had written to Mr. President, which was delivered. We've written to Mr. President, copied the Senate President, copied the Speaker of the House of Representatives. The Senate President happens to be Senator, dismissed Senator Godswill Budokpabio. He's from Akwa Ibom State. And Tajuddin Abbas, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. We wrote to the National Security Advisor. We wrote to the Governor of Akwa Ibom State, and they were served. And we have certified copies that those letters were received. The appeal is that Mr. President should use his presidential powers to secure the release of our sons and daughters and the driver of the AKTC bus who is in captivity. If you look at the pairs I'm wearing here, the pictures are all there. We're calling for them to be freed. But beyond that, we have also made recommendations, 2 options. The first option is drastic reforms of the style and operations of the NYSC scheme. Let members serve in their geopolitical zones, either state or geopolitical zones. And the economic impact of service on the country and on the participants must be redefined. These, our young ones, have given so much. Some of them get killed during elections, some of them get raped, some of them are even missing till date, and a number of these cases are even unreported. So we want that reforms so that these people can be skilled up during the training, and then they could come out with benefit, because we cannot rely on government jobs and all of that. And then the second option, if government does not want to do that, within 30 days, we've given a time frame for government to set up a high-powered reform committee. If government is not willing to do reforms, let government scrap the NYSC. It was a post-war arrangement for integration. It served the purpose then, but it's been bastardized now. The risk, the losses is too much. on parents and the participants. So that is the position of Igbo People's Congress. And we are buying in, we are telling other groups and organizations, like you've seen Open Forum has joined, other groups and organizations should sign up so that we can together drum this across the world to make government to come to the rescue of our children.
It's a really serious conversation, but we apologize. That's the much we can take. It's a really, really serious call to the federal government and every agency that can actually help. The NYSC was a post-war initiative to foster unity. Now, it's been several years down the line. Is there still a need for the NYSC scheme? Well, big question there that Citizen Matthew O'Connor has left on the table. But that's where we draw the curtains this morning until we return to your screen next week. We do hope that we'll get some good news. My name is Uya Aneke. Thanks for doing this. Let's meet again next week.
Every day marks a day of significance.
That in view of the apology tendered by this former minister who had earlier been cleared by this August Assembly,
as we face critical issues, developments and events which shape our social and political landscape here in Nigeria and beyond. Political Spectrum is a program specially designed to help make sense of all the moving parts of developments and occurrences in our nation's polity and political economy.
There is nothing wrong with Nigeria, but there's everything wrong.
The educational history of public figures holds significance beyond mere biographical details.
From executive, legislative and judicial developments at national and subnational levels to international diplomacy and relations.
Join us for exclusive interviews with key political figures, expert opinions, analysts, thought-provoking conversations for and against, shedding light on the major issues that matter. We will always keep you updated on the most factual, smartest and unbiased reportage.
Stay tuned to Political Spectrum. Political Spectrum. All sides matter at the round table. Political Spectrum. Exclusive to Spectrum Television.
SpectrumTv, broadening your horizon.
What do you know about asthma? The rainy season is upon us, and one of the illnesses associated with this season is asthma. Approximately 300 million people worldwide currently have asthma, and its prevalence increases by 50% every decade. In 2019, the number of persons with clinical asthma in Nigeria was 13 million, likely the highest in Africa. According to the World Health Organization fact sheet, asthma affected an estimated number of 262 million people in 2019 and caused 455,000 deaths. About 1,000 people per day die from asthma. These fatalities are of serious concern because many of them are preventable. Spectrum Television was out to find out what is asthma, what are the causes, symptoms, and treatment for asthma. Asthma is a chronic condition that affects the airways. It causes difficulty in breathing as well as wheezing. There's been a number of recorded deaths associated to asthma, including some of our top celebrities. Join me as I examine professional opinion on asthma, causes, effects, symptoms, and preventive measures. What is asthma? Asthma is a disease that affects your lungs. It is caused by an inflammation and muscle tightening around the airways, which makes it harder to breathe. It is a chronic lung disease affecting people of all ages.
Okay, asthma is an ailment of the breath, has to do with the breathing system and the breathing organ. Okay, it affects its patients and is one of the growing diseases, or should I say ailments, around the world now.
Well, asthma is a sickness of the heart that gives someone difficulty to breathe, and most of the time it's caused by maybe cold weather or a dusty environment. But most of the people get it from childbirth, you know, and at times they grow with it, which at times the cure is not always much available.
What is an asthmatic attack? When you breathe normally, muscles around your airways are relaxed. However, during an asthmatic attack, three things happen. Bronchospasm, where the muscles around the airways constrict or tighten. When they tighten, it makes your airways narrow. Air cannot flow freely through constricted airways. 2. Inflammation. The lining of your airways becomes swollen. Swollen air lungs don't let out as much air in and out of your lungs. 3. Mucus production. During the attack, your body creates more mucus. This thick mucus clogs your airways. When your airways get tighter, you make a sound called wheezing when you breathe, and you might also hear an asthmatic attack called exacerbation or a flare-up. This is a term for when asthma isn't controlled. What types of asthma are there?
Okay, there are different types. You have the cough variants, you have the exercise induced, you have the bronchial asthma, you have other forms. The symptoms help to differentiate the one type of asthma from the